Thank you so much for listening to the She Has a Name series. As always, I just want to give you a heads up. We talk about murder and other acts of violence in this show, so listener discretion is advised. You know, I was thinking about how Antonio now has most of the answers he's been searching his entire adult life for. He now knows where his mother has been for the last 3 decades, buried in an unmarked grave. He now knows the savage way she was murdered. And police are now closer than they ever have been in trying to find who did this to Anita. So where do we go from here? Well, I think it's going to take more for us to heal than finding and punishing the person who murdered Anita. Because what if that never happens? You're feeling nervous, Antonio? Yeah.
Very much so.
That's understandable, but what do you feel nervous about?
Everything.
Recently, on a rainy afternoon in April, Antonio and I traveled to Philadelphia to meet with Dr. Robin L. Smith. She's a psychologist known for many years as the resident therapist for The Oprah Winfrey Show. She co-authored this excellent book called The Invisible Ache with Courtney B. Vance. It's about Black men identifying their pain and reclaiming their right to grieve. In light of what we've all learned about Anita's death, and the feelings of guilt and shame that Antonio has kept deep inside of him for so long, seeing Dr. Robin just feels like the most natural thing to do. And also, what does living look like for Antonio, now that we all are learning the depths of his pain and suffering?
My dad, he was always really short. He wouldn't really talk much.
That's Anita, Antonio's daughter and his mother's namesake. At 33 years old, she's the eldest of Antonio's 5 children. But even though she's named after her grandma, she didn't know much about her until 2020, when authorities matched Antonio's DNA with his mother's remains. It was the first time Anita heard more than just a few words about her grandmother.
The picture on her obituary is when I was like, oh my God. I look like her. I remember we were at breakfast, and I was like, what happened to her? Because he always would say, I look like her, or I remind him of her. And I always hear my Auntie Val say that. So I'll ask, like, what kind of person was she and what happened?
Anita says she'd noticed that her dad's disposition would always change whenever she brought his mother up. The last time she remembers trying was one day when she was 13.
He just kind of looked, and he just kind of went back to eating. Like, it was real quick, like, oh, she passed from cancer, and just kind of went back. So I was like, oh, okay. And as things went on, I realized that it was just something he didn't want to talk about.
Antonio had Anita when he was young and angry, barely 20 years old, and still working through something he couldn't even explain to himself. Well, now, in his 50s, Antonio is talking, trying to find the words and lift the shame.
We can't be ashamed of who we are, or our experiences, good or bad. And I think one thing that's come out of this process and this project is confronting the good, the bad, and the ugly.
How does a man like Antonio tend to that invisible ache that lives inside of him, not only for himself, but also for the people who need him the most, his children? From TMI Productions and APM Studios, Truth Be Told presents She Has a Name, Episode 7, Healing. Hey everyone, I want to take this moment during this short break to share with you something that has been making my life a little bit easier these days. Factor meals. They're fresh, never frozen meals that take about 2 minutes to heat up. And what I like about them is that the menu is created by chefs. They're also healthier than takeout. They offer calorie smart, keto, protein plus, and vegan options. If you're interested in them, I would suggest you give them a try. And now is the time to do that. Head on over to factormeals.com/Tonya50 and use code Tonya50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off of your next box. That's code Tonya50 at factormeals.com/Tonya50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is still active. Imagine if one day you were accused of something terrible. You swear you didn't do it, but no one believes you because someone says they saw you do this terrible thing, and that someone is your own brother. Beyond All Repair is a new podcast series from WBUR in partnership with ZSP Media, and it tells the story of a woman named Sophia Johnson who was accused of murdering her mother-in-law in 2002. At the time, Sophia was 6 months pregnant and gave birth to her son in jail. She hasn't seen him since. And so for the past 3 years, she's been telling WBUR's Anne-Marie Sievertson her story in hopes of getting justice for her mother-in-law, having a chance to meet her son, and finally being believed. The question is she telling the truth? Listen to Beyond All Repair wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for the honor, Tonya and Antonio, for this moment that we get to co-create.
When Antonio and I met Dr. Robin, we wanted to make it as close to the idea of therapy as possible. This is Antonio's first time meeting with a licensed mental health professional, and a session with Dr. Robin is the first step in modeling what might be beneficial for both of us as we continue to grapple with the grief of losing Anita.
I want to start off by telling you something that Antonio just recently told me that I'm carrying with me right now and thinking about, that I didn't even know until recently, that I was the first person he actually told in his life about his mother as an adult.
You know, this isn't about that I show up and have all the answers. It's that I show up and you show up and you show up. And we see what magic and what miracles can happen. Particularly, Antonio, as you have been careful, that's the word I'm going to use, about who you shared your vulnerability with. And I call that wisdom.
Say more on what you mean by that.
Because when we've been hurt and having your mother literally vanish and have no idea where she was and what happened, the world would feel very unsafe. And so it's wise of you that you waited until someone arrived, and that's Tonya. And so I think often men and Black men are blamed for their silence when it is grand wisdom. They're just waiting for the right person to arrive.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. We know there are reasons. I mean, you met lots of people over the course of your life.
And that's always been the question on why didn't I share? And I couldn't articulate that, but I think you just did a great job at that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it feels different, I think, to wear those clothes. Like the why didn't I share is like, well, was there something wrong with me that I didn't tell my love interest, that I didn't tell other family? No, nothing was wrong with you. You were careful. you were cautious, you were wise to wait until someone arrived and it felt like this is the time.
Yeah. What I feel inside, to me, it's layers to it. And it's not easy to, for someone that's never been in my situation, to unravel. So a part of that is me also protecting them from the complexities of my hurt, my pain also. So, I would just think of casual things just to kind of gloss over their questions. Not so much as to mislead or be deceptive about it, but there was still a lot of work that I had to do, a lot of coming to terms that I had to do.
Yes.
And to open that up just to anyone. Just didn't feel like that was the right thing to do.
Yeah. It makes so much sense also that when you suffer and suffer something that has no words, I mean, how does a child, you are a teenager, how do we find words for things that took our language away? And not that you couldn't talk, but you couldn't talk about that. And that's why I say grand wisdom, because there was something in your experiences with people. It's not blaming anyone, but why questions are questions that put us on the defensive. Why didn't you drive down that street? About anything. Why did you have this flavor of ice cream? Why? There's nothing wrong with being curious, but how we are approached can make us feel that I've done something wrong. And I'm wondering, did you ever think maybe I will say more?
Yeah, it crossed my mind from time to time. But once again, I just didn't think that that was the right time.
I was thinking of one story from Moses in the Old Testament, and it says that he saw a bush burning, but the bush burning was not consumed by the fire. And I thought about you, and it goes on to say that he goes over to the bush and he looks at the bush because he's fascinated. And this is why I thought of you. He's fascinated that there's fire, but the bush is not burned. It's somehow intact. And I feel like that's your story. There's been fire. And I think it's significant because I also know that fire is part of the trauma of what happened to your mother as well.
That's so interesting that you even use that as an example, because how you say your whole life has been trial by fire. You've been on your own. You've had to deal with this very devastating thing that you also say you feel like it put you in a state of arrested development. But you are intact from the outside. You have this beautiful family. You have a career. You are the most loving, giving person. The thing that Dr. Robin, you talk about in your book about getting by versus getting better. Mm-hmm. All the things that Antonio has done in his life has worked pretty well, but I'm so concerned about the inner turmoil because the suffering in silence, I'm just wondering if it's still serving you. If it's just the part that got you by, but at this point now that we have so many answers and you are excavating these deep things, is it bringing you on the path of getting better, of finding new tools in this next leg of your life
so that you can be connected to the people who want to be there and connected to you in the way that you have for them.
Well, and I think, Tonya, what you're saying is, can you, Antonio, begin to receive
Yes.
all the goodness you give?
Yes.
Can you begin to receive the grace that you give? Can you receive being loved on in a way that you love on so many other people? And so it's a question. And before you even respond to it, I want to remind us, you, Tonya, and me, that your pace for doing it is your pace. It's not, are you moving fast enough for me, your partner, your family, your kids? This is that you've got a story, and that story shaped you. And so this isn't, how do we do an extreme makeover on Antonio? Because that, again, would say there's something wrong with you. And there isn't. Like, who would you want to say more to? Who's in your life that you'd like to know you more intimately?
I think throughout this process, I've tried to imagine loved ones and family and friends that are still in my life. But then I'm also a little upset with myself because I've also lost a lot of family and friends that will never know. And that's kind of painful too, because there were opportunities, but at that point in my life, I just wasn't there.
So can we talk about fantasy versus reality? So the fantasy is that now that you know what you know, and you look at the people who are gone, who have passed on, and you're like, I missed that opportunity. I wish that they could know. So the wish makes all the sense in the world. But the fantasy part of that is, if you weren't ready, then you weren't ready. And so the word I use is grief. Like, can you grieve that you don't have the opportunity to share with some of those people, but not blame yourself for it? Like, can you name one person who's gone that you really wish that you could tell?
Yeah, my grandfather.
Your grandfather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So there can be grief. And I'm wondering if what you begin to share is that you wish that you could have told him, but you couldn't, not only because of who you were, but quite possibly because, and you didn't know, but also because of your journey with him. But the guilt, and that you use that word, guilt usually, particularly something like this, is where we have been helpless, but we're still holding ourselves accountable when we ourselves had no other choice.
Antonio, you have a lot of guilt around what you were not able to do around the time when your mother disappeared.
Well, I just wish I could have saved her.
Which makes all the sense in the world. Of course, you wish that you could have saved her. At 4, there are 4-year-old little boys, or 14, or 24, or 44, who wish they could have saved someone, and particularly their mother. So the question is never to challenge what you feel. My question is, can you tell me more about that desire to save her?
Yeah, somewhat. I watched her struggle a lot with the loss of her mother, the dissolution of her family, but I also saw her champion them and the cause of family for them when it appeared that all was lost for them. And she was highly regarded for that, still to this day, hearing people speak of her in that way just kind of brings tears to my eyes because that's how I knew her to be. But, similar to myself, she didn't have much of a support system for herself, nor the language to articulate, what was happening on the inside.
Yeah.
But I watched her cry, right? Mm-hmm. I watched her pose questions to herself and try to solve these riddles that may have driven her to the lifestyle that ultimately consumed her life. So there was times for me in which, I don't know, I just felt like I could hug her and just tell her everything would be all right. But I knew that it would take more. And I just didn't have that capability.
Right. So your helplessness, I mean, that's part of what we're talking about when we are helpless to save someone who is worthy and who deserve to be heard and embraced just like you do and understood. And so a part of what I hear is that you're talking about not only your helplessness, but that she herself didn't have anyone really advocating for her. She was the cheerleader. She was the advocate. I mean, much like you, as you said. And so what does it mean for you to both see her in you and you in her? And if she were here now, what might she say?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. But I think she would encourage me to be a better person, for sure. And maybe, forgive me, I guess, for, whatever I couldn't do.
So this is interesting and important. So what you're thinking is that she might encourage you to be a better person and forgive you. You knew her and I didn't. I'm wondering if she might remind you that you are a good person. Yeah. Not encourage you to be one, but be a mirror for you to see what you already are.
I have to step in just to say, I think your mom, if she saw you right now, she would be so proud of you. And she would also tell you that there was nothing that you could have done, that this was not something, that she carries anything in her, an expectation that you would have been able to do that. I really do feel that she wouldn't encourage you to be a better person. She'd be proud that you are a good person. Because you are.
And that's why I said she wouldn't encourage. She would let you see the mirror of what is true. But what's really important is that we make room for you to talk about what voices are in your head. Those voices that feel like you're maybe not the good person that you are. The voices. So see, when we shut anyone down from telling us how they're feeling, then they stop telling us. So we want to make sure that you have all the room in the world to say, let me tell you what whispers to me at night or during the day. And what's whispering to you and maybe yelling at times is that you somehow failed her. So it's not about whether it's true or not. It's that that's what you carry.
We'll continue with our session with Dr. Robin L. Smith after this short break.
Oscar Gomez was a Chicano student activist in the 90s, a radio DJ, and a rising star.
He was fire. He was charisma incarnate. Everyone had a crush on him.
He was a voice of people who didn't have a voice.
Until his sudden and mysterious death. What happened to Oscar? Imperfect Paradise, The Forgotten Revolutionary, wherever you get your podcasts.
How do you hold space for someone in your life who has gone through something like this?
Yeah. Less is more. Less talking, less analyzing, less trying to get someone to say what they are not yet ready to say. What I will remind all of us is that sometimes when people push to get more information, and they say it is to help you, I want you to express yourself. But it may be that they don't know how to manage their own anxiety, their own helplessness. They see that you are maybe struggling, or they imagine, given what you are living with and through, that you must need something. And they're going to be the ones to give it. That's their hero fantasy. Like you had yours that you could save your mother. Now there are going to be people who want to come in and rescue you. And you're saying, whoa, wait a minute. I don't need rescuing. What I need, and you can clarify whether this is true, is someone who honors my pace and my space.
Yeah. How did you know that?
I don't know how I knew that, but maybe because, again, it takes one to know one. Yeah. Someone who honors your pace and your space.
Yeah.
I tell you, there's so many of us, I don't want to just say a generalization, but I have a lot of, Black women friends who's like, I can save him. Mm-hmm. I can save them. I can save this. I can do this.
Right.
What you're saying is so important.
Right. And what I'm saying is, no, you can't.
Yeah.
Go save yourself.
Yes.
No, you can't, girl. Go save yourself. And he does. And see, also there's an ignorance, and I mean this with all due respect, and we don't know better.
That's right.
We've been trained as, Black women. I mean, Black men feel that they have to carry the burden, which is why you're trying to not burden anyone, because you don't want to make other people sad. So here you are being a good Black man. You don't want to burden anyone. And Black women are like, oh, but I can get my cape on. I can put my cape on and I can make this better. So our hearts are in the right place. Your heart not wanting to burden anyone and make people sad. And, our hearts as Black women wanting to, get the cape out and save the day. But I'm here to say it doesn't work. It exhausts everyone, and it puts barriers between us. The gift we can give anyone, but right now we're talking about you and talking about men and Black men, is to honor their space and their pace. And how we do that as women, go find your own joy. So one of the issues is, we have this illusion of closure, that we get information and now we're finished. That's about as untrue as anything. But the real issue is, how can you integrate what has happened? Not get rid of it, not bury it away, but how can I let it and your mother, in particular, your love for her, your respect for her, your confusion, the abandonment that you did not understand for many, many years, that she didn't leave you. She didn't not come back. We didn't know, you didn't know, that she lost her life. You know, I talk about putting our trauma in a meat grinder of sorts so that it can become usable currency. That if we leave it shattered, we can't do much with it. But if we can put it in through our own process of living, it's like the redemption of the pain. And that's really what we're talking about. How do I redeem my suffering? How do I redeem it for something worthy of a life that I'm still trying to live?
And I think something powerful you asked, Antonio, was, who does he want to? I think it was something like, who does he want to know him? And I think something you and I, Antonio, have talked a lot about is your children.
And I was going to ask about them. So tell me about your parenting of them and how much of, what do they call you, dad or daddy or both? Yeah. So tell me what they know about you.
It's been a hodgepodge of things that I've tried to hide from them or not share, as not to sadden them about my experiences in life per se. But I think, you know, in 2020, when we got my mom's remains back and held a memorial service for her, I invited them all to that moment with me. So I think that marked a bit of a turning point for us in our relationship, because it wasn't just words anymore. It was something that they can see and understand. Now, granted, you know, some of them are still quite young, and I don't expect them to understand everything.
Well, they may not understand everything, but even a 9-year-old and even younger, they do understand sadness and joy.
Yeah.
And a part of when you talk about not wanting to make them sad, and other people, you said you wanted to protect people. I'm sure you want to protect people. And in doing that, you also were protecting yourself from sharing in a way that felt quite possibly too painful for you. And so I'm wondering if, and that's why I said, is there a person? Because sometimes if we start thinking in numbers, it's like we're overwhelmed. Like, I don't want to go to the family reunion and do this, or I don't want to tell my whole family. So I'm wondering what it would mean for you to pace yourself and think about how you might begin to share with your children, one at a time or two, or however you decide to do that. But it's not just sharing the story of your mother's death and what happened. It might be meaningful for them to hear what it cost you. See, that's a piece of the redemption. So this happened to me, but then something else happened to me.
Yeah.
When that thing happened. And that's the part we often don't know how to talk about. It's not only her death and how she died and that you didn't know you didn't know anything except for that she never came back. So that's traumatic. Absolutely. But then it's what it did to you.
I have a last question for you, Dr. Robin, and maybe it's more of just a quandary, thoughts. one of the things that I was surprised by, but actually not, because I know it's probably more common than we know. But Antonio shared that he's only ever really cried twice in his life that he can remember. And it's when his mother disappeared and then when they found her in 2020. And emoting, expressing, it's each individual's way. But I think about what that pent up emotion feels like and what that is like. And can you give any wisdom or thought to that? Because that was just so striking to me as someone I'm constantly crying a crybaby. And I know we're all different, but.
And not a crybaby. You are free. Tears are our teacher, whether they come out or not, they're teaching us. And what I would say is you haven't cried outwardly.
Yeah.
I imagine you have wept inside. Yeah.
Yeah. My heart cries.
Your heart cries, yeah. Mm-hmm. Have you been aware that your heart was crying? Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of made me feel like it was emotionally inaccessible for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it can be debilitating to some degree, you know.
Well, you were guarded. You were guarded, and so you may have been debilitated, rightfully so. So I'm just wondering if you have a question for me about anything, about this, about you, about me, but if there's something more you want in this moment.
I was reading some of your book this morning, actually, and you made a comment that something to the effect that you have to renew your commitment to yourself every day.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expound a little bit on that?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
You know, it's interesting, and thank you for reminding me of that, because I do have to renew, and we all have to renew every day. You know, when someone says they are, they've been delivered from something, or they're clean and from drugs or drinking or whatever it is. And I always think to myself, you mean in this breath? You mean in this moment, you're clean? You mean in this moment, you're free of bitterness? And when someone says, you know, I'm like not bitter, I'm thinking, well, if you live long enough, something's probably going to stir that pot again. And so that renewing every day of the commitment to yourself, to be yourself, to love yourself. I have a quote that says, starve the lie and feed the truth. So I have to ask myself every day, what lies do I need to starve? So for you, it could be when I blame myself. You might say, ooh, wait a minute. Dr. Robbins said I got to starve that. That's a lie. Not because you're a liar, not because I'm a liar, just because it got fed to me. And I'm wondering, for you, are you much more comfortable giving to people than receiving?
Yeah, indeed.
Indeed, you said. Indeed.
Yeah.
So, you know, so what truth might you begin to feed? So when you're asking about the renewing.
Yeah.
And I mean, every day, because I'm doing this every day, honestly, and not just one time a day. Because when I find things creeping up, you know, we're all conditioned with thoughts. We think we're driving our own lives. Like, you know, I'm doing me. I got like, No. Somebody else is doing us, until we become conscious and clear and awake that I've got this whole programmed thing going on in my head. And so I need to begin to starve that, but I have to replace it with vibrance and with things that are true about you. So could you tell me something about you that is true? You might be uncomfortable admitting it, but something wonderful about you that is true. Uh-oh.
That I'm worthy of love. You know,
You are.
I'm worthy of love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
But sometimes I struggle to give it to myself.
yeah. But this is how you start, because you're able to say, I'm worthy of love. But sometimes I struggle to give it to myself. Okay, me too. So you're like reading you're reading me. And how can I work on allowing myself to love myself? I love that you picked that, not receiving love from other people. That's great. I mean, that would be, I'm sure, important too. But you went deeper. You went deeper and you said, loving on you, from you. Yeah. So to begin to feed that, to renew yourself every day, that you're going to remember that you are worthy of love. That was the truth that you knew. And you're going to find some large or small way to cultivate and grow that truth. You know, what we focus on grows. What grows has dominion. So if I focus on that I am worthy of love and I do something, then I have an action that allows me to feel that I love myself more that day. That's the work of your soul. It's the work of healing. And that's why I said we can make it something huge. It is huge, but not these big things that we say, oh, I have to, sign up and do. This is an internal, it's an inward journey of healing and liberation.
Well, thank you, Doctor.
And your mother, I feel, is here. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she's here.
Yep. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, telling you to run on.
Yep.
Yeah, to run on.
I'm very honored and I feel blessed to have you in this space with us today and share some of your wisdom.
Yeah.
On such a, what's been for me such a gripping subject.
Yes.
I know that, there's still a lot of work on my own behalf that I have to do for myself, but I think I'm up to the task.
Yeah.
So it's exhilarating to hear it from others.
Yes. Yeah. You're definitely up to the task. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
Yep.
So I would ask, where do you have sweetness in your life? Where do you allow moments of sweetness so that you are not only carrying the heavy stuff, but there has to be play?
After the session with Dr. Robin, one of the most amazing things happened. Robin's team walked in with boxes full of cookies and cakes and candles.
So you missed a lot of birthdays and all of that stuff with your mother.
A celebration of Antonio, the way Anita loved to do.
What I was thinking, but you can decide, that for the birthdays you missed, not just yours, but your mother's. So I thought that maybe we would honor your birthday, her birthday,
August 3rd.
that we would take a moment to have a birthday celebration and acknowledgement of her and you. And that's why I said, she's here.
Yeah.
She's here.
Dr. Robin had Antonio light the candles on top of the cake and make a wish.
Yep, there we go.
Okay.
And she loved parties. She loved to celebrate, didn't she? She loved to.
So she would very much.
This would be yes, this was exactly, this is it. This is it.
Yeah. So So maybe you'll make a wish, and we're your witnesses, so.
And with that, Antonio made his wish, a wish between he and his mother.
What did it mean for her to be thinking about you in that way?
It meant everything. I mean, that's probably one of the nicest things anyone's ever done for me and my mom, and I like the fact that that wasn't missed on her, that was awesome.
Before we met with Dr. Robin, Antonio was skeptical of the idea of talking to someone. He had all of these ideas in his head that maybe he'd be lying on a couch to be psychoanalyzed, as he put it. But the experience, he says, has actually opened his mind to the idea of therapy.
How did it make you feel to hear her say that all the ways you've been operating through life was wisdom?
Wow, like somebody finally gets it, That's how it felt in a way.
Starving the lies we tell ourselves about who we are. Starving out the regret we can sometimes feel for the choices we make. And lifting the shame to reveal the truth. These are powerful words of wisdom for me, too, as I grapple with my own behaviors in life and my desire to understand my nephew, Antonio. Don't you just wish you had somebody like Dr. Robin on speed dial? Finding a good, impartial person to talk to hold empathy and space for you, it's what we all need and deserve. We've linked to some resources to help you find your own therapist on our website, shehasanamepodcast.org. Next time on She Has a Name.
My thoughts, my hopes, my dreams, my love and my feelings. P.S. I love you. Always yours, Anita.
For 3 decades, Antonio and Anita's sister Val kept under lock and key their prized possession, Anita's journal. Inside, her last words before her disappearance. On our next episode, we hear Anita in her own words.
March 17th, 1987. After sleeping on what we talked about over the phone yesterday, I decided that you are right again. Maybe it is time to let go. You have done it so many times before and kept coming back to the same old shit, and there's no change. There's no trust for me and you, and no strength to stand up to you and me.
She Has a Name is a TMI and APM Studios production. Our team includes executive producer Antonio Wiley, showrunner Nicole Hill, audio producer and sound designer Marie Mendoza, and research producer Kristen Fraser. Our music was composed by Andy Clausen. Sound design and final mastering by Enrico Benjamin. APM's executive producer is Erica Kraus. Senior production manager is Nick Ryan. And APM executives in charge are Joanne Griffith and Chandra Kavadi. I'm your host, creator, and executive producer, Tonya Mosley. I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Robin and her team, Charlene Horn and Reggie Jacques. Also, thank you to Jay Powell of Philly Podcast Space in Philadelphia for hosting us. My admin, Rochelle Roberts, Melissa Kuipers at NPR West, and thank you to everyone who has talked to us about this important story. This is for us. We'll be back on your feed in 2 weeks for the latest installment of She Has a Name.